buttons are on when you're not speaking. I think everyone's here dialed in. We're going to try to use our hands to vote. We're going to try to use our hands to get in line to speak or to, yeah, Councillor Miller has two hands. That's great. We're going to be voting. Yeah, there's Councillor Gatward. So we're all here. So I think the rules are the same. You're used to how we're going to do this. I am going to do the attendance though by asking you to please indicate that you're here by saying present. Not that I can't see that you are, but I need to do this to keep it formalized. Councillor Wheat.
Yes.
Councillor McAlpine.
Present.
Councillor LaFerriere.
Present.
Councillor Howes.
Present.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Pierce.
Present.
Councillor Chambers.
Present.
Councillor Miller.
Present.
Councillor Coleman.
Present.
And Councillor Gatward.
Present.
So we're all here. Thank you. Number 2 is the approval of the agenda. Councillor Coleman.
Actually, I have that. I actually have that one.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Anyway, it's just moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Miller that the agenda for the County of Brant Council Special Meeting of June 16th, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. Before we go to adding or subtracting anything from the agenda, I just want everyone to know that there are staff on this call. Some staff you'll see in windows, others we don't have room for, but they are available for questions as we go through the agenda. So know that there is more staff available to you than what you see on the screen. So with that being said, is there anything that you want to add or take away from the agenda? Seeing none, approval of the agenda. Okay. Number 3, declaration of pecuniary interests. Anyone have any? Councillor Miller?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, were we going to vote on the agenda?
If there's no, we can if you like. There's no additions, nothing taken off. We can vote on the agenda as it stands. That's Councillor Coleman. It's on my sheet. Yeah. You have to take away unmute yourself there, yeah.
Yes.
Moved by Councillor Coleman, seconded by Councillor Miller. All those in favor? Approve the agenda? Yeah, thank you. It's carried. Pecuniary interest, Councillor Miller? Do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything. I want to vote on the agenda.
You were just directing me back to the agenda. Thank you. Number 4, adoption of the previous minutes, please. Councillor Chambers?
Mr. Mayor, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Pierce that the County of Brant Council minutes of May 26th and June 2nd, 2020 be adopted.
Does anyone have any questions to either sets of minutes? Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And it's carried. Thank you. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 6, staff reports. RPT 2060, update of council meetings during the declared emergency procedures. Councillor House?
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bell that staff report RPT 20-60, update to council meetings during a declared emergency procedures, be approved as presented.
Does anyone have any questions to the report? Anything you want to ask staff or you're not clear of? Councillor Gatward first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question through you to the clerk is, will this allow Zoom electronic meeting delegations in future?
Heather?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it's intended to allow for delegations. It would be in person, though. It's not having the public dial into our Zoom call. That's not the intention.
Right, they would be actually at the council chambers with a staff member.
Yeah, we're
Is that
working out
correct?
exactly where they will be, but they will be in a physical location with a staff member, and that stream will be zoomed into the meeting.
Great, thank you very much.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Heather. A couple of questions, if I may. One regarding page 19, where we talk about how we can increase the reach to people as we move into statutory public hearings. What practically are we doing? Are we going to use the same approach we use for the telecoms towers, where we increase the radius, I think, to quite a bit more than the statutory 120 meters?
Heather?
We haven't proposed any change, so whatever that last planning update said is what we're still going with in terms of the planning notices and that. The only real change we're making on our end is actually allowing the delegations to come in and speak. So I haven't touched any of the planning process in terms of the notices, the timing, the radius, any of that.
Okay, I think it may be worthwhile thinking about that, just increasing the reach that we normally have beyond 120 meters, at least until the emergency is taken away from us. A second question, if I may, Mr. Mayor. In camera meetings, I think I know the answer, but why do we not use Zoom?
Heather?
I'm sorry, why do we not use Zoom for which meetings?
In camera.
Oh, in camera? At this point, it's because we have a dedicated line conference call that nobody has the ID for and passwords. We can look at doing Zoom in the future. We just thought it was more keeping it contained to just those that really, really need to be on the line. We also don't need to have a bunch of IT folks on the line if we do it through teleconference. Zoom's just a little more open than the teleconference meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about the report? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I read the report correctly, I believe we're still going to hear 5 planning applications at a time, but we're not hearing them in a pack, the Planning Advisory Committee. We're hearing them as a council. Is that correct? And the reason I'm asking is because when we hear them as a pack, sometimes things change between a Planning Advisory Committee and when it eventually goes to council. If we're hearing the applications at a council directly, that decision's final unless we can get 2/3 to overturn it. So I'm just wondering, why are we doing planning applications before council and not before PAC?
Michael?
Heather can answer, Mr. Mayor.
The theory on doing them at council was that we could do the whole thing in one meeting instead of having people, the exact same presentations come at a planning committee meeting and then at council again. We are going back to the 2 meetings. So one will be just information and get the input, and the next will be the decision and the bylaw, and everything goes through at once.
Is that a good enough answer for you, Councillor Miller?
Well, it's an answer, so I appreciate that, but I'll leave it at that. But I feel that no, we don't normally hear everything at planning and then everything again at council. Normally we just get the report at council. So I am of the belief that we could be doing planning applications in a pack, and I understand that you, Mr. Mayor, at council chambers, but it would be simple enough to have the chair of planning sit there. But maybe something to think about in the future. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Heather, do you want to respond to that at all, or?
Yeah, we'll look into it. I mean, certainly everything is up for grabs. We haven't talked about bringing any standing or advisory committees besides the few exceptions back yet. So it's certainly something we can look at. This is not going to be the last report on processes.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question is to Heather, the process you just mentioned about going back to the 2-meeting system, will that start in July or August?
Heather?
I believe the planning notices that have gone out for July speak to the 2 meetings. Pam might have a better answer.
July is it. Yep.
Oh, July, we're going back to 2 meetings starting July.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of A? Thank you. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 6B, Councillor Laferriere.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McAlpine that staff report RPT-20-54 contract award Curtis Avenue North reconstruction be approved as presented.
Are there any questions to the report or concerns, Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm not opposed to taking the money from the Cedar Street at this point in time, but what I want to just confirm here that if we do in fact take this money out of that fund, is that going to delay the start of the Cedar Street reconstructions?
Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll turn that question over to Mr. Walton. I think he can answer that.
Through the mayor to Councillor Pierce. So what will happen with the Cedar Street project is it'll be reconsidered in the 2021 budget, and it's staff proposal this time that we put those funds back into that project for 2021. Once we missed the window for public consultation on that, there is no possible way of having that constructed this year. We certainly will be able to find a way, virtually or whatever, to do public consultation to allow that project to potentially happen in 2021. It would be our intention to refill that count up to the amount necessary through the 2021 budget process.
Okay, so that answers how it'll be recouped. I appreciate that. Can I ask one more, Mr. Mayor?
Sure, Councillor Pierce. Yep.
Thank you, through you. I guess it's on page 28 of our report. It talks about with the construction of Curtis Street there, or Curtis Ave, and it talks of the installation of the low pressure sewers. Well, it states in there, it says the construction cost of $154,880 to install low pressure sewers. It says to service all of Curtis Ave, but in the report it states several times just a portion of Curtis Ave. So I just want to confirm, the low pressure sewers that we're speaking of here, that they are in fact going to service the entire Curtis Ave.
Rob?
Through the mayor to Councillor Pierce. Yes, this option for the low pressure sewers will put the low pressure sewers in front of all the properties on Curtis Ave North. And all that has to happen after that is each of them connect, and a pump has to be installed on each of the properties.
Right.
And then they'll be fully functional. There's 2 or 3 businesses here which are quite desperate for this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And this has turned out to be a good news project for them, and we want to get it moving.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that, and that it's a great news with doing this. Thank you. Councillor
Howes. Councillor Howes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just piggybacking on Councillor Pierce's question to Rob Walton, just because people may ask the question when they hear Curtis Ave, everything about this is related to Curtis Ave North. We're not doing anything to Curtis Ave, the residential Curtis Ave South, correct?
Rob?
Through the mayor to Councillor House, that is correct. This is all Curtis Ave North, starting at the intersection with Dundas East and going north. The reconstruction of the road happens to just past the entrance of the health hub, and then we will be continuing on with the sewer. But it's with this low pressure sewer, it's a very simple construction. Not a lot of restoration required on the road.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And it's carried. Thank you. Number C.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Pearce that staff report RPT-20-55 community improvement plan applications be approved as presented.
Any questions for Councillor Bell regarding the report and the process? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question. The pages 52 to 86 in my report weren't completed. I didn't see any, I couldn't actually judge on the merits of each case because there was no information on which to judge it. So maybe it's just an omission by staff, but I'm prepared to go forward and say yes, but I would like if somebody could send the completed applications to me.
Michael?
Heather can.
I can speak to that. It's just because it was a fillable PDF. It didn't show up when we compiled it. So we will send out the completed application forms.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Thank you. Number D, Councillor Wheat.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Garwood, that the Lafarge agreement extension request be approved.
Any questions? Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. My question is a couple questions, actually, if I could. What was the original date that this was supposed to be prior to this extension?
Who's going to take that, Michael?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would turn the question over to Rob. I don't know whether he would have that information.
So through the mayor to Councillor Pearce, I believe that the date is the end of July this year.
Okay. Now, that being said, if I could, Mr. Mayor, follow up on that. I appreciate the fact that they've run into a change in material, and then you throw COVID into the mix, and that's all fine and dandy. But I was puzzled and shocked, actually, that they're asking for a 3-year extension. And you know, the second half of that question is asking for a 3-year extension. I would suggest they probably would have known prior to now that they were going to require that time. So I'm just curious about all the timing of this, why it's coming through now, and why do they require an additional 3 years in order to complete this with the change in product. I get that.
Rob, you have an answer for that?
Through the mayor to Councillor Pearce, there's a few things at play here. The first is that we found out partway through this endeavor that we had to do an EA, an environmental assessment, to decide what we were going to do with some of the parts of this road as we reopened it. So that process is nearly complete. I've actually seen the draft of the final report, and it will come in front of council soon. So that actually, in the discussions with the landowners there, has brought up several things which we're trying to address and decide exactly what we're doing to reopen it. So we're not quite actually ready to do the project yet anyways. And one of the main things that when you see the report that we talk about there is the whole influence of this road on what we're going to be doing on at Falkland with the 2 roundabouts, which now has been approved, and we're getting ready to sign the agreement with the federal and provincial governments for that. And it's actually the proposal in the report not to reopen this road until that project is done, which is anticipated to start in 2021, probably be completed in 2022. So I think that there's things out of the control of Lafarge here which have entered into this situation that the timing of this is not that bad when you consider those things.
Okay, so I appreciate that. So this is more us setting that timeline than them requiring an additional 3 years to dig out the aggregate that's there.
I'm not sure exactly how long it will take them to do that. I think that the 3 years is definitely a conservative estimate as to how long it will take. I do not believe that they'll be asking for any other requests. And it's possible that we can end it before then.
Okay, thank you.
But is the 3 years is beneficial to both of us, is that right?
By the
That's
sounds of what I
right.
heard.
Yeah. Okay, good. Any other questions? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Rob, I attended the meeting we had with the residents a few months ago on the alternatives for Cleaver Road. Have we actually gone back and let the residents know that this is going to be potentially a 3-year delay? And if we haven't, can we go ahead without public input on this?
Rob?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bell, we discuss in the report here that we will alert the residents of this once we have approval from council to extend the agreement. There certainly was talk at the last meeting, which you attended, that this was a likelihood. At that time, we knew that they were going to probably request this, and it was talked about at the meeting. None of the residents there really have that great a concern about getting that road reopened.
Okay, I mean, if you feel the residents are not going to be troubled by this, I'm happy to support it.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Councillor Gatward, number E.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by Joan Gatward, seconded by John Wheat, that the staff report RPT 2059, which is tender and extension awards for June 2020 operations, be approved as presented.
Questions or concerns to the report? Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, regards to the portion of the report for the salt, when we're talking about treated and untreated salt, my question is, does that add anything or change the process that we have to do now with getting the untreated salt? Or I'm just trying to understand as to, is it going to speed things up by having the treated or add additional steps without having the treated? Can you add a little bit to that for me?
Mr. Walton?
Through the mayor to Councillor Pierce. So we're going to use the treated and untreated salt in different ways. Part of the untreated salt will actually be mixed with sand and used on particular roads and in particular weather conditions. And then the treated salt is used in other scenarios. So we're going to be using it in different ways, using a few different management practices. And as you can see from the table there, there's ways for us to save money by using both. Mm-hmm. We've talked in previous reports some of the advantages to the treated salt in using less amounts, but there's times in very cold weather and whatever where probably the advantages of that are not as great, and we're going to go to different management practices at that time, using the untreated salt and in some cases mixed with sand.
Okay, and that's part of our process today, correct?
Well, we have used that in the past. I think in the last few years we've mostly been using treated salt.
Okay.
So we're going to be changing our process a little in some weather conditions.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then to the part of the report, Mr. Mayor, if I could, for the storm sewer catch basins. I'm just, first of all, my first question is the WESUC, that's who does it, that's who has the contract now. Is that correct? The existing contract, who has that now?
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure who has it.
Okay, because I thought it was you see a lot of the WESUC trucks around. I'm just curious because the reason I'm asking is it's a huge difference between the who we're going with here and what I thought was the existing contractor that's doing it now. So I was just curious, is it apples to apples that we're dealing with here, because it's a substantial difference with the price from Neeltech.
Through the mayor, councillor, dollars for the wastewater plant, which obviously you would see their trucks down there, and they do other functions for. I'm not sure that they had this contract recently, so. But staff are, I'm happy to go with this bid, and if this contractor doesn't turn out to be acceptable, there would be ways under the contract to deal with that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Councillor Gatward, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to comment that I was pleased to see that we are using the cooperative purchasing group for our salt. I believe we do save taxpayer dollars using that cooperative, and we have used it somewhat in the past. So thank you to staff for that. And I do agree with the one report about not putting our depot at the Mount Vernon site. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I know that when we discussed putting it behind the depot in Mount Vernon, it sounded like a good idea at the time, but apparently it has some snags. So, any other questions, Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, along the sentiments of Councillor Gatward, the kudos to Rob and the staff for the salt contract, and to me that's 800,000 over 2 years, I think, is a significant amount. And I'm just wondering, was there any thoughts to maybe doing a media release on that? Because I'd like to share good news stories, and I think this is a good news story. So just the question of if they thought about sharing that with the public.
Rob?
It's certainly something that through the mayor to Councillor Miller, it's certainly something that could be done. We in public works and operations, we usually like to get our nose to the grindstone and just get the work done. We are not much on doing that sort of thing, but we certainly like to work with our communications people, and I'm sure that we could do that.
Any other questions?
I just want to say thank you, Rob, and give yourself a pat on the back. 800,000 times.
Any other concerns or questions to the reports? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Thank you. Councillor Miller, you have F.
I do, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman. That staff report RPT-20-60 AMO 2020 conference be approved as presented.
Any questions to number F on the agenda? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Thank you. G, Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chambers that staff report RPT-20-63 County of Brant update on COVID-19 emergency be received as written.
Do we have any questions or concerns about the report? Anything you want clarified? Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page, I guess it's page 80, what is it? My apologies, page 96, I guess, of our package. It talks of the responsibility that we weren't notified of these workers coming to Brantford and the hotels and stuff like that. I'm curious, whose responsibility was it to notify us?
Michael?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. At the end of the day, that's a good question, and I don't think there's a clear answer to it. Part of creating EOCs in an emergency is to create seamless communication between agencies. Emergency workers is called, I believe it's the there's a name for it. I can't remember, but it's to interoperability between agencies. And but of course, this is another EOC. This is a Norfolk EOC. So We were eventually notified, I think, but there was a gap there where we didn't know that neither the Brant EOC, or more importantly, the Brantford EOC knew this was happening. So we have communicated with the Norfolk EOC. We've received a response back. We'll be following up further. And I think it was a good learning experience for this area and how we can communicate better. So.
All right. Thank you for that. And Mr. Mayor, just a follow-up, if I could, a comment on the same page when it talks of the county first responders, including Brant Paramedic Services and the members of the county fire services continue to serve on the front line of emergency. Both of these services performed in an exemplary fashion during this difficult and complex times. I think that's fantastic. It's not surprising to us around this. Well, I guess we're not around the horseshoe, but it's not surprising to us in the county, but I just kudos out to them, and it's fantastic to see that, and it's not surprising at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following up on John Pierce's question about the temporary farm workers, you should be aware that at least within Brant County, when temporary farm workers arrive, there is a document called the outbreak plan developed. So should we have something similar happening as happened in Norfolk County, then there is a plan that addresses it. So, and I believe that has already been lodged with the EOC. So everybody that needs to know knows already, and it will be just enacted as a plan going forward. I think that the difficult part of the Alderman Norfolk incident was there was no evidence that there was a plan in place, so it caught everybody short. If I could ask a question on page 93 regarding the financing issues around our COVID response, perhaps just for the benefit of myself again, but for those people listening, if we could explain what municipal funding is, because it's the single largest line item in the 1.375 million that we see as the issue or the sum of the cost of the issue to date.
Mr. Bradley?
Thank you, Your Worship. The treasurer is on the line. She's not on Zoom, but she's on the phone. Maybe I would turn it over to her and ask her to respond to the question. She can certainly answer that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Mifflin, can you please address the question? Okay. Heather, are you there? Okay, I will, I don't know, we've lost Heather, so I will give it a shot. Municipal financing is where the tax levy rolls through. And so any on a budget level, and this first page 93 is the budget statement, and it's broken down. That gap would be more reflected, but that's where income to the county falls in, mostly through the tax levy. So that's why it shows that's basically the loss of income, and the loss of income is around the tax levy, the potential to miss a portion of the supplementary tax levy, as well as revenues that would roll into the county. So hopefully that answers the question, and we can get further information on that if council would like.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
Excuse me.
The treasurer is now on. So.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I unmuted. I must have been double muted. Did you need further clarification, or?
Are you all right, Councillor Bell? You're fine?
Yes,
all right. Thank you anyway. Councillor Gatward.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gatward.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to that same page 93, this is a comment for the treasurer. The first line there shows a savings of $3,000, an adjustment of $3,000 for the mayor and council. And is that related to our conference expenses? Because this year, most conferences have been canceled or are virtual, and our cost will be much less. And I would think that the $3,000 would be almost a savings per counselor and expense, because we also don't have mileage. So how did we arrive at this number?
Ms. Mifflin, are you able to answer that? Okay, I think the treasurer's having challenges with her phone. I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe that's from it. Oh, Robin has her hands up. She can answer the question. So
through you, Mr. Mayor, the treasurer has texted me and she says, yes, that is in fact conferences.
So if I might, Mr. Mayor, one AMO conference, for instance, can cost more than $2,000 for one counselor to attend. So we have 10 counselors and the mayor, and none of us are going to conferences. So why isn't that number higher?
Your worship, I think I can answer the question. So this is we're making conservative estimates on an ongoing basis. So that number will probably creep up as the situation goes on. But we don't want to presuppose that maybe AMO, well, I think AMO's moved to a virtual conference, but perhaps other conferences may not evolve in the fall. So again, we aren't making assumptions beyond what we know currently. And what we know currently is that some conferences have been canceled, some they're not sure. And so this number will continue to evolve, and there'll be additional savings as this situation goes forward, and there'll be additional expenses as this goes forward. And that's why you'll probably be receiving this forecast as this goes forward. And I don't know whether you've noticed, but this number is changing every time you see it. And that changing number is going to be reflective of us starting to make other decisions, such as what Councillor Gower just mentioned. Maybe we won't do any further conferences this year. So that's I think the answer to that question. These are conservative assumptions. They're not set in stone at this point, and they will be evolving.
Thank you.
Councillor LaFerrier, I'm sorry, you were first actually before Councillor Gatward, so if you could speak now, I'm sorry about that.
No problem, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, Councillor Bell had brought up the emergency plan in case we had some farm workers in a situation like Norfolk. In the current situation, there's been some controversy and confusion about whether or not farm workers who were stationed in the general region had like a concierge that spoke their language that they were able to get information from. Do we have some steps in place as a county and as I guess a health unit as well, I suppose, to make sure that if we do have an outbreak on a farm in the county of Brant, that we have folks who speak the language of the folks who are working to be able to communicate effectively with them?
Mr. Bradley?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. I saw Councillor Bell put his hand up. I don't know what he can speak on behalf of the health unit as the new chair, but I can say I'm not exactly sure of that. What I would suggest is that the health unit has a good grasp on temporary foreign workers, bring them both in and addressing the potential that they may need to be quarantined. So I would have some reliance on that. But the other thing to keep in mind, the reason we've set up an EOC with a large group of people and that we train is that we are very nimble for this. So if that situation happened, as just many other situations would happen, I think we do have the capacity, talent, and capability to very quickly assemble whatever strategies we need to deal with the situation at the time. And if that involved reaching out to the other levels of government to find translators through embassies, we could very quickly do that. So part of managing emergencies, you just don't know what's coming around the corner. So it's less about having really definitive strategies in place and having a system that creates strategies very quickly.
Thank you. Through you again, Mr. Mayor, it may be worthwhile to catalog or find out what languages are being spoken, because for a lot of the people who are coming, they might only have one language, and English might not be one of them. So it might be a nice preventative measure to have a bit of a catalog and some numbers handy in the meantime. But I appreciate the answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Bell, did you have your hand up?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just to answer Mark's question, that within the Brant County Health Unit, there are Spanish-speaking staff, and they have been assigned or were assigned when the temporary foreign workers came to Brantford.
Good. Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and I do know firsthand because I have many workers out in my area of the county, and we have various countries here. And for instance, one farm owner he speaks Mexican himself because he brings Mexicans to his farm, and other farms. Pardon? Oh, other
I think you meant Spanish, Councillor Gatward.
Spanish. Sorry. I'm not up on all the languages, as you can tell, but I do know that they have a lot of the same workers year after year, and they can communicate well. Now, that doesn't mean maybe the hospitals can't, but Councillor Bell has assured us that they have employees that can also communicate. So I think that we're pretty well covered, but I'm sure the health unit could provide us more information if we needed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Gracias, Mayor. I just want to ask about Brant E-Ride. Are they allowed to do non-essential trips?
Michael, who's on the line to answer that question?
Thank you, Ms. Chair. And Ms. Stevenson is on the line, and I would turn that over to her. She is on the phone. I think we're having a bit of a phone problem. Cindy, are you able to answer that question? Okay, I will give it a shot. I know we've had some discussions about, we encourage people to only use the E-Ride program for essential activities during the midst of the early, what I would call the bulk of the pandemic period. I believe we've relaxed that situation. We're still, but we are still discouraging ride sharing at the time. So.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, does that answer your question?
No.
No.
Are non-essential trips allowed with E-Ride? I know, Michael, you said you're discouraging people, and we're discouraging ride sharing, but I want to go for a coffee with I just want to go for a coffee. Can I use E-Ride? That's my question. It's non-essential. Can I do it?
Michael?
So, Mr. Chair, I could be corrected. I am struggling to keep up with everything these days, but I believe we have allowed non-essential rides to commence, but we're still discouraged. I think we're still discouraging ride sharing, or we're not allowing ride sharing. But I will confirm that. If not before the end of the meeting, then we'll provide an email out to that. So,
point of order. I believe Cindy is off mute, so I think she can answer it.
Cindy, are you there?
Yes, I think I am here. I apologize. I think I was double muted there as well. Yes, I can confirm that our messaging is now relaxed on use of the transit program. The language around essential and non-essential rides, we're no longer using the service can be used essentially for a ride as a user so chooses. And as Michael said, the shared aspect of rides is not being practiced given the physical distancing requirements that are still in place. But the service itself is open for anyone who would like to use it.
Councillor Miller?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, and back to the workers again. A lot of them too that I know of, the farmers that I know of, out the other way toward Hamilton, they are also faith-driven as far as they've been sponsored by a church, or they have come up different times, like every year for 4 or 5 years. So they do have a connection to home through their churches, and they usually have a representative, because if something happens at home during regular times and they want to go back, there's always emergency plans to get them home quickly, or if someone just wants to go home, doesn't work out, if something were to happen and they just don't want to be here anymore, there's always a lifeline to their own community too. But it is a good idea, and I think most of the farmers are trying to have someone who speaks the language work with the workers, just because. I know that it's probably not across the board, but I know it's a lot of farmers are trying to do that. So that's just my 2 cents worth there. Anything else? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know this is something that's happened after the report was written by Michael, but on Friday last week, we pushed out a note from the County of Brant to say yard sales were not allowed. A subsequent note went out on Monday to say yard sales are now allowed. I find this a rather premature step. It rather conflicts with all the very consistent messaging that we've had from the mayor and from the health unit. And if anybody's been out shopping in the last few days, they'll realize that people don't always wear masks, people don't always wash hands, people don't always keep social distance. And when it comes to a yard sale, by its very nature, social distancing is probably gone. People pick up things, they put them down. It seems unreasonable or unlikely to expect that every time something's picked up and put down, it's going to be sanitized again. I just feel like that's the first thing that we've done incorrectly in terms of the sequencing of opening up. I realized from my discussions with Michael and our solicitor that it is permitted. Well, rather, the answer is we have not said it's not allowed. We haven't said it is allowed. The province hasn't said it's allowed. They've just said it's not allowed. Or in fact, they've been silent on it. But I just want to register my concern that we really have almost a moving petri dish effect potentially, and we should be very thoughtful about supporting this. I would like to be able to say, let's just hold on it for another month or so, but I'm not sure we've got the ability to do that.
Michael, have we gone too far forward to take that back, or do we?
Thank you, in your worship, and you know, I think we run the risk of drifting into legal advice, but I think I can provide a high level understanding of how we've been approaching this. As Councillor Bell mentioned, we discussed yard sales back in April as the weather started to improve. They were not, it's my understanding, explicitly prohibited by the provincial directives, but our solicitor was able to read those provincial directives and extrapolate that it would be defensible for us to prohibit them in our community. That was presented to the Unified EOC group, which includes the health unit, the hospital, City of Brantford, ourselves, and Six Nations of the Grand River, as well as some other partners. And we made a decision that we should prohibit them in our two communities, Brantford and Brant, and we've done that. On Friday, a number of provincial directives were released consistent with the stage 2 reopenings. Our solicitors both were reviewing these. There was a lot of them. And I think we did have some concerns come forward, and their position now is that those directives which we relied on to prohibit the yard sales aren't in place anymore, and we can't legally do that. Now, we wouldn't be in a good position if we said to someone, you have a yard sale, we don't want you to have that. So I think I've probably correctly summarized our position on this. When the stage 2 reopenings were announced by the province last week, it was discussed at the Unified EOC with the medical officer of health and the chief executive officer of the hospital. Will our two communities move forward? Should our two communities move forward and commit to all the reopenings that the province is permitting? And there was agreement we would do that because they become very hard to enforce otherwise. So that's been our approach. As the province reopens things, we basically, our messaging is this can reopen. Partly it is because we don't have a very strong position to enforce it otherwise, and because it's what the province is telling our citizens they can do. So now, if council has some concerns about yard sales, an option would be for you to direct me to take back to the Unified EOC and ask our medical officer of health and the chief executive officer of our hospital system to discourage those, and we can put that messaging out. And our messaging from the Unified EOC has, I think, been well received and powerful because it involves what I would call the key stakeholders in our healthcare system. So that could be an option that council could say, is that they could discourage yard sales for the time being, ask people to hold off, and I could bring that forward to the Unified EOC. I think if council wanted to prohibit yard sales, we would need legal advice, and we would need to deal with that in camera, I believe. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm sorry it's a long-winded answer.
Are you okay with that answer, Councillor Bell?
Yeah, I like that answer very much, and it actually jives with what I've seen on social media in terms of commentary about the agreement to reopen. A lot of people are expressing skepticism and concern. So I think if we put a note out that discourages yard sales for the moment until things get better, I'd be very happy with that.
Thank you. Councillor McAlpine. Councillor McAlpine?
Yeah, you hear me now? Okay. My biggest concern was the community yard sale coming up the August long weekend there. And that attracts thousands of people, whether just by not advertising it or promoting it on the county level, is that sufficient?
Yeah, that's a big problem. The same problem that I had when we were talking about Applefest, that people in villages, be it Burford or be it St. George, I'm not sure how happy people are to have 2,000 people wandering around the town when we don't know where they've come from. I don't know how we would do that. It's kind of tricky. I mean, maybe no one will come, but if history has any bearing on it, a lot of people will come. So we do have to make a decision on that, because that's a very big event, and once you open it up, it will happen. So Michael, how would we deal with that? Should Councillor Bell and I just bring that up tomorrow at the health unit and talk about it there?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think council has several options. I mean, I can bring it up at the unified EOC and see if that group, which is a group of executives of all the agencies, if they agree, and we could release a message. Council could direct staff by resolution to release messaging discouraging yard sales in our community. I think that would be in order, Madam Clerk. Yep. So that's or it could be left, as you say, with the health unit members to bring that up at their own meeting as well. There's some different options for council, I believe.
Councillor Ferrier, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just a suggestion. Maybe because we have discouraged and encouraged, I wonder if just not I shouldn't say not addressing it, but not promoting the rule change might be sufficient for now as well, because it's going to be very confusing messaging for a lot of folks.
Yeah. Councillor McAlpine, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards just not advertising it rather than putting out another message discouraging it. That's maybe Allison, have we advertised it in the past? I think we have promoted it.
We have? Okay. Any other comment? She's nodding. Any other comments or concerns before we call the vote? Councillor Gatward? Oh, Councillor Gatward, can we just let Allison speak for a moment? Allison?
Yes, maybe she knows the answer to my question.
Okay.
My question was, the Burford community sale is huge. Do either of the Burford councillors or Allison know whether that's being canceled by the organizers?
Anyone out there know about Burford? Allison?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Gatward, we haven't received notification in our department that it's been canceled. I can certainly look into it. Again, in the past, we have advertised some of these events, but I can confirm whether they've canceled those.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Number 8, Councillor McAlpine.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Leferrier that the staff report RPT 20-64 COVID-19 temporary patio allowance be approved as presented.
Is anyone not clear on anything from this report? Do you want clarification? Councillor Howes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question for staff on this one. I was reading the detail about accessibility. Actually, two questions. The first question is about the accessibility, and I'm familiar with the portable access ramps, but I was wondering if Allison could illustrate an example of where ramped access might be needed in a patio. Are we looking at a situation where people may be going through a restaurant to access a patio in the back, and therefore they need the little ramp to get that example? And then I have another question following up.
Allison?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor House. Each scenario is going to be different depending on the property. However, what was envisioned with that was access from the sidewalk, so eliminating the curb drop. So, for example, if some of these patios were located within parking areas, they would still have to access it from the sidewalk to the street level. So having ramps, accessibility ramps directly outside the restaurants to access the patio itself.
Okay. Follow-up question, Councillor House?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Also to Allison. I support this recommendation wholeheartedly. My question is, are there any extra resources that we could offer to help expedite the process? Like it sounds like you and Russell are going to have a lot to go through in a very short amount of time to access a narrow window of opportunity between now and October 19th. You put together a great report, but is there any extra step we could take to help make this go faster?
Allison?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor House, we have actually been fielding these questions for the past week since the announcement has been made. So we've been advising on certain steps that they can take to have in order in anticipation of this potentially being passed this evening. So, for example, having the insurance coverage, their patio layout plan, all of their sort of ducks in a row. So should this be passed, they are ready to go tomorrow. So we have it as streamlined as possible, and the commitment by staff is that every application would be responded to and or approved within a 24-hour period.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for all the work you have all done on this.
Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I definitely thank you to you and Russ and Zach. I've been in touch with him a lot as well during the last month on some of these issues. And one of the things I'm wondering about is, especially if this pandemic goes long, or if it even goes into next year, if we get another pandemic in the future. I lived in Aurelia, went to school there for a while, and in Aurelia, I know some of the bar owners there, and some of them rent out the municipal spots in front of their buildings, municipal parking spots, and then create decks and patios temporarily for certain weeks of the summer. Is that something that we might see in some of our downtown areas in here, St. George, Burford? Is that a potential, or would that be too much of a parking conundrum?
Allison?
Through Your Worship, are you referring to in the longer term, like beyond the period of these applications?
Yeah, yes, I am. Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's something that every summer for about 8 to 14 weeks, certain restaurants in Aurelia, that's what they do. They pay the entire parking for the spots, because they have paid parking there, to the municipality, and they essentially rent out the spaces, and they create patio spaces. It may be an option in the longer term, or a reoccurring thing, and it just asking if that's a potentiality, or if we need to do some parking work on that.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Ferrier, we certainly could look at that as a longer term option. We chose this vehicle for the 2020 season because it was, quite honestly, the most flexible and nimble tool we had at our disposal in order to get these up and running as soon as possible. But for the longer term, and assuming that we may be in a similar situation even next summer, we could certainly look at more permanent options for patios and restaurants. As I mentioned, for the 2020 season, this was the most expedited process, and some of them certainly may find value in it and desire to do this longer. We've designed this so this program itself would end in October of 2020. And we could certainly work with planning staff and operations to see what some permanent options might be for the program.
Thank you. Councillor Gatward, you had your hand up?
Yes, I did, Mr. Mayor. I'm on live. Okay, I'm checking my mute here. I want to make sure you can hear me. Thank you. So this report refers to all restaurants in the county, whether it's a Tim Hortons or a country restaurant down in Onondaga. It doesn't matter where it is. And are they aware that they can apply this temporary patio allowance?
Allison?
Through your worship, all restaurants will be notified should this report be approved. Staff will reach out to all of them as of tomorrow. But it would be, depending again on their geography and whether it was actually feasible on their property, any restaurant would be applicable and able to apply.
Great, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions, concerns? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Coleman, number I.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Pierce, that the staff report RPT-2065 potential salt depot roads be approved as presented.
Any question to the report regarding the salt? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Okay, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Chambers?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Howes that staff report RPT 2066 be approved as presented.
Are there any questions to the report? Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question and a comment, if I could, and I'll start off with the comment, if I could. I just want to say thank you to everybody that was involved with this. This is fantastic news that this is in front of us at this time, and I think it's a fantastic thing for the county, and I really look forward to this getting going. My question is, and I believe, if I can, through you to Michael, I believe you touched on it earlier when we were speaking about the Curtis Ave construction. I just want to confirm that they're not going to collide, that the reconstruction of Curtis Ave is not going to affect the start of the construction of the health hub.
Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, no, I believe we have a reasonable construction plan. They shouldn't have any complexity at all. And in fact, I think that, as Mr. Wald mentioned earlier, it's a good time to be doing all this. So.
Okay. Thank you for that confirmation. And again, this is fantastic news. I support it 100%. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a question as such, but on page 108 of our report, it indicates that Primary Care Community Family Health Team is a for-profit organisation. I can be sure to tell you it's not for-profit. If we made a profit, that would be wonderful, but we don't. We are fully and wholly supported by the province in that respect. But I would like to say thanks to all those people who have got this project to this stage. It's been a great piece of work done by the county and by Brooke Haywood in particular. I just look back in the files. I came to council before I was a council member in May of 2017 to present the concept of a community health hub. At that time, I had indicated it was somewhere between 15 and 75,000 square feet. I think it's ended up at 42, so roughly in the middle. I thought it would be somewhere between $7 and $20 million. It's ended up at about 12 or 13, so pretty much where we thought it would be. I give it my whole support. I think it's one of the best things that could have happened to our county in this COVID period.
Yeah. Any other comments? I think it's a great thing too. I'm glad it's not being stopped. Councillor Miller.
Just, I was looking at the list of people that or companies that have bid, and I'll just say that there's a lot of good companies on that list. They all build really, really good, but I have seen some buildings done by Norlon in the past, and they were all top notch. So fingers crossed that this one is as well.
Any other comments? Councillor Wheat.
Norlon bid the addition to the South Dumfries Community Center.
What did you say?
Norlon did the addition to South Dumfries Community Center.
And we're all very pleased with the way that turned out.
Yes.
Councillor Miller, do you have any other concerns or comments?
No, I would echo what Councillor Wheat said, that we've had good experience with them. So fingers crossed that it continues.
Yeah, they were easy to deal with during the process, I'll tell you. Very creative bunch of people. Any other comments before we call the vote? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Thank you.
Can that be noted that it was unanimous, Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Bell.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McAlpine that staff report RPT 20-67, provincial phase 2 reopening municipal splash pads and pools be approved as presented.
Are there questions to this report? Councillor Pierce first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, on page, what are we on here? I guess we're page 122 of the report. I appreciate the fact of what's going into this and how complex it is to get the splash pads and the pools open and that sort of thing. But on page 122, it talks about the contracted external services. The current time allotted by the contract service to start up the mechanics of the pool is June 30th. I'm just curious as to what takes so long to fire up the mechanics of the pool. I'm confused at that.
Michael, who has that answer for us?
I was also on mute. I think Cindy is trying to. Cindy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank
Cindy,
you.
can you answer that question?
Yes. Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's actually the contractors have become extremely busy following the province's announcement last Monday. We typically schedule them well in advance to come in and check over the mechanical operations of the pool and get that going, which is typically scheduled for May, but obviously we had to cancel that. So immediately following the province's announcement on Monday, staff made a call to the contractor to tentatively schedule a date for them to come in, and the earliest available date is June the 30th.
Okay. So it's not a fact that it takes them that long to fire it up. It's a fact that they're busy and we're in queue to be completed. Okay, I appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
Councillor Leferrier, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Cindy. What's our exit plan? And I ask that just in case we either have an outbreak, if there's cases connected to us through contact tracing, or if there's just a general resurgence of COVID in the area, or even, I guess, lastly, if a number of parents just decide not to take their kids to swimming or splash pads, and we're not seeing a ton of use Do we have sort of an exit plan for any of those scenarios?
Cindy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we are working on developing those plans. I do have to say that it was a bit of a surprise that the province did permit pools to open as part of phase 2. We were anticipating the possibility of splash pads, but not pools. So staff have been quickly putting together guidelines and protocols based on information that we currently have from the Life Saving Society, as well as the Ontario Recreational Facility Association. But we do anticipate some further standards and regulations to come from the province to assist us with putting together some of those things. We will have built in some measures to track who is using the facilities, and any of those particular protocols we'll be working with the health unit on before we opened. And if we do proceed with opening, we would be constantly monitoring our use. And I think if something changed in terms of, the facilities just not being utilized, we would definitely be coming back to council with updates on what was happening with the facilities and whether we had a different recommendation to possibly end the season early.
Just if I can, again, Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
Through you to Cindy, I'm wondering then if that sounds great and that's very well reasoned and makes sense in the context of everything. I'm just wondering if it's something where we might just assume we're going to get a report to council ongoing on this, because I really feel like it could be a bit of a hot potato. There could be a lot of community anxiety about it. And also just, to me, it's of all the things being opened or reopened right now, it appears potentially the riskiest. And I just, as a councillor, I'd like to remain in the loop in case we have to make any quick decisions, if that's possible.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chambers, did you have your hand up? No? Councillor Gatward then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report says that opening the 3 splash pads would be an additional cost to the approved 2020 budget of $50,000. And I wondered if Cindy could explain what is the additional cost for? Why? Are they charging us more, or is it for tracking, or why is it costing more?
Cindy, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. So the additional costs are primarily due to additional staffing that will be required to open the 3 splash pads. Typically, we do not require to have constant monitoring on site when the splash pads are open. But during this pandemic era, we would have a staff person stationed at each location during the regular hours of operation. Those staff would be monitoring the users coming in, ensuring that they are soft screening, do not have any symptoms, to use the facilities, constantly monitoring the water, following users leaving the facility. They would be sanitizing for the high touch areas at the splash pads to ensure they're sanitized for the next user. So most of those costs are attributed to staff being on site, and there are some additional costs associated with some additional PPE and hand sanitizer to be available on site.
Thank you very much for that complete explanation, Cindy. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cindy. Are there any other questions to the report before we call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to number 7 on your agenda, which is communications, and there are none. Number 8, resolutions. Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Pierce, a resolution regarding tax assistance policies. The recommendation, whereas many Canadians rely on tax benefits and credits to supplement their incomes, including the Ontario Child Benefit, Ontario Guaranteed Annual Income System, Ontario Seniors Homeowners Property Tax Grant, Ontario Trillium Benefit, Ontario Child Care Tax Credit, Ontario Seniors Public Transit Tax Credit, Low Income Individuals and Family Tax Credit, and the Disability Tax Credit. And whereas based on the Canada Revenue Agency Child and Family Benefit Tool, tax credits can account for 50% of some households' total income. And whereas income is a key determinant of health, and strategies to increase income levels can improve health outcomes for vulnerable households. And whereas over 25,000 individuals in the County of Brant census area are low income based on the low income measure. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has created further economic hardship for many households in the County of Brant, and relief programs related to the pandemic may create new tax intricacies in the next tax year. And whereas many households face barriers to filing income tax and cannot then access numerous tax credits and benefits. And whereas the County of Brant appreciates and commends the tax filing clinics provided by the Office of the MP, the Seniors Resource Center, and other community agencies for the benefit of our community. And whereas the County of Brant is committed to supporting and working in conjunction with the current tax assistance providers, whereas residents will benefit from greater awareness of tax assistance opportunities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to 1, develop an inventory of agencies or businesses that provide free or low-cost income tax assistance. 2, develop and execute a communication plan to promote these tax assistance opportunities to the community. And 3, provide a council report before December 31st, 2020, outlining options for the municipality to assist residents with accessing tax assistance in future tax years.
Thank you for bringing that forward. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Carried. Other business.
Thank you.
We didn't ask for any other business, but Councillor Bell, you have other business?
Really, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to reflect on what I saw on the news today, that the Paris Fair has been cancelled. And clearly that's a significant impact to the folks in Paris and to the economy of Paris. I have not heard, and perhaps John McAlpine may know now, or may have a better sense now of what is happening with Applefest, but it looks like all of the major festivals in our area have now been cancelled.
Councillor McAlpine, do you have anything on the apple harvest?
We've been waiting for the Paris Fair to make their announcement, and we'll be meeting on Thursday night to make our final decision, but I think we're leaning towards passing for this year and having it next year.
Yeah, unfortunate, but it's been a crazy year. But any other comments or business? No? Councillor Gatwood, are you got your hand up or?
Yeah, yes, I do, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Did we vote on item I as in ice?
Yes, I think we did. In fact, I believe it was unanimous.
Okay, I thought we were voting on it, and then Councillor Pierce started talking about the health hub, and I thought, oh, did I miss I?
Yeah.
Perhaps the clerk can enlighten us.
Yeah, Heather?
I was recorded as voting, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other new business? Seeing none, we'll go on to number 10, bylaws. And I guess I can't be unanimous if Joan didn't vote. So you must not have voted, Councillor Gatwood. So we'll just leave it at that.
Maybe I was too busy reading something else. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That's okay. We'll go to bylaws now, number 10. Councillor Howes, I believe you have those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wheat that bylaw numbers 53-20 to 62-20 be read the first time.
Okay, and before we do that, did anyone want any of those separated? I should have asked before we, no? So we're gonna vote on them as a group. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor? First reading. Okay, Councillor Howes, please, for the second reading.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wheat that bylaw numbers 53-20 to 62-20 be read a second time and all preambles and clauses be approved.
Okay, are there any questions that anyone has before we read it for the third and final time? Seeing none, Councillor Howes, if you could continue, please.
Mr. Mayor, I think we want to vote on that last one first.
Oh, sorry. All those in favor? Thank you. Carried.
Now we need to do it the third time.
We do.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wheat that bylaw numbers 53-20 to 62-20 be read a third time and passed, signed, and sealed.
All those in favor? Opposed and carried. At this point, we have to decide on our next meeting.
Call the chair.
Call the chair. Well, we have it down here as June 23rd, but I think we could do June 23rd or call of the chair, whatever works best. We have an in-camera meeting coming up on June the 23rd, and we'll have to figure out the details as to how that's going to work. Heather's been working on it. Heather's been working on a lot of things lately. And so thank you for putting this together tonight, Heather, with all your helpers. And we'll wait to hear how you tell us that the in-camera piece is going to work. Any other comments or concerns for the betterment of the county? Seeing none, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Councillor Pierce, thank you. We stand adjourned.